It is Barbenheimer weekend, truly the cinematic cultural event in at least the United States, but perhaps around the world, that is happening this year in 2023. There will literally be there will not be a more crowded weekend in this year's box office. The advertising for both Barbie and Oppenheimer have been through the roof. They've also sent it out to all the TikTok and Instagram users to just keep promoting it through all different kinds of methods. And so here we are, I have to cover it on opening weekend. So let's talk about Oppenheimer first. You'll get that when you see the movie. Number one, sound design. That is both my wife Amanda and I's number one thing coming out of this movie, is that the intentional choices of when and where to place the Foley, the dramatic sound effects, the score, all of those audible instances throughout the movie were composed so well. I can't currently think of another movie recently that had such a palpable subconscious effect on my viewing experience, specifically with this sound design. This would be when you have that sound design Oscar at the Academy Awards, this has got to be one of them. This has to be one of those. It is just, I don't know, the whole experience just really pulls you in. I don't know. I am in awe, and I will be listening to the soundtrack this year. I will have to go, spoiler, not spoiler, but for me, I'm gonna have to go see this again, just because I want that in theater surround sound experience one more time. Number two, you've got the acting, the cast. This is a deep well of actors, and all of them, for the most part, are firing on all cylinders. I will note that having the lead from Sky High and Josh Peck in this movie is very strange for a 90s kid. Just to have them be the goofs that I grew up with be in this very serious period piece. Did they really distract from it? No, but it just feels odd to have them, to see their careers like that. But then again, I'm sure it was for people who watched Woody Harrelson and Cheers, see him be in Zombieland. So, it's each generation has that. So they're mine, apparently. But enough about them. Cillian Murphy, amazing. I knew he could do it. This is his first real big stage to show off his acting chops. Peaky Blinders, TV show, yes. 28 Days Later, sure. And several other, little more independent, more lower budget movies that he's been in. But this is his first real big stride as a leading man, and he killed it. He absolutely killed it. It helps that he's been in 6 Nolan movies so far, but he's just never been the lead. And so this is his. Emily Blunt, great. Do I think it's her best performance? No, but it's also part of the writing of who her character is. So it's not my favorite character that she's portrayed, but she did it very well, especially in Acts 2 and 3. And then you got Matt Damon doing well, of course, here. Not the most likable character, but honestly, this movie is about mostly unlikable people who are in a bitter and just terrible era of humanity. And so, yeah, one of the Safdie brothers is in this movie, and he did an excellent job. The part where he puts on the sunscreen is probably one of the funniest things. One of the funniest images, just made me laugh. It's great. Robert Downey Jr., let's just get it out of the way. He came here to play. If he could get a supporting actor role, like Academy Award for this, I would give it to him without a doubt. Like no, just don't even let me see the other nominees. Let's just present it to you, because wow, like such a good performance. There's also some other characters that you probably don't even know are in this movie, other actors I mean, that you don't even know this is a movie. There's definitely one that surprised me the most, and it was such a juicy, great scene showing off this actor's talent, but that's a spoiler that you'll need to go see. And then, yeah, I don't know, Robert Downey Jr., man, I just walked away like, man, I'm so glad you were able to shake off the scales from Doolittle and get your time to, reign in the sun again, and not just be Iron Man, but just be a great actor. And so, and not Iron, don't get confused, Iron Man is one of the best things he's ever done, and will be a shining star, but he will still have other big things, big trophies in his filmography, and this is one of them. So yeah, acting, superb, deep well, I could go on and on. We will transition here from the good to the bad. The transitioning, it's because it's the most middle ground. You'll understand why here in a second. The writing in this is easily one of the, this is the best writing Nolan has ever put forth. Like, the whole movie, there's courts, there's judging, there's me, I, as the viewer, felt cross-examined on the life of Oppenheimer. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Where does he fall within that spectrum and in that gray area? And I felt like it wasn't a one-sided portrayal of his character. It truly showed every facet we could possibly have or need to sit and weigh on this judgment for weeks. And so while there might be some over-expository moments throughout the movie, it's a history movie. I expect history innately comes with exposition. So, it did not bother me at all. I felt like the story was told well, and we'll talk about length of story later, but yeah, I felt like it was truly one of the best things Nolan's ever written, and so it should be applauded as such. The only weak part of his story, really, there's a character played by Florence Pugh. She's great. Florence Pugh, one of the best actresses rising up right now in the field, and I love watching her. But I was seeing on TikTok a lot of people doing research about this character. It's a very complicated character, one of the only women out of a very womanizing history that could really had a hold on Oppenheimer, and she was apparently bisexual, and she was, had all this and that, but she had this they had this intertwining connection, but then she has a tragic end. And I mean, it's history, so I'm trying not to spoil too much there, but yeah, so the problem is that depth that people were digging up out of the woodworks of her bios that can be found on the internet, it just wasn't showcased as deeply in this movie. And for a movie with a 3-hour runtime, I mean, she was maybe in it for like a sixth, and I just don't know if her story really had that impact as the history books would show. And so I felt like her character arc and the impact that it had on Oppenheimer's scope of his life really was the weakest part of this story, when in fact it probably could have been pushed even more, based off what the records are showing and based on how relational Nolan wrote this movie. Because even though it's a history movie and it's a examination of human life, in that it shows this ensemble of how interwovenly connected these relationships are. And so yeah, we'll skip into that with the next part. Let's just go by saying, like, prude, not prude, nudity. I'm all here for the story. If it merits being shown story-wise, then I will give it a pass-fail. I'll give it a pass, like, whatever. Do I think it needs to be shown? No, I really never do. But I am less judgmental, less turned off by it when it really plays into the story. There are 3 scenes in this movie that have nudity, and this is the first time that Chris Nolan has done any sex scenes or any nudity of any kind in any of his movies. Which is one of the reasons why this is also his first R-rated movie. And there's not much else R-rated about it. There's some language here and there, but nothing really. It could have been more PG-13 level. I think the nudity pushed it over the edge. 2 out of 3 of the nudity scenes, I just was kind of like, all right, that makes sense for the story, whatever. It wasn't incredibly overly in your face, and specifically the second one I felt was like that really pushed. I understood. I've read interviews of why Nolan shot the more fantasy one. We'll just say that, the more fantasy one. I understand why he did that, and the emotions he wanted to evoke were evoked in me. So success there. There is and you can fast forward to the last bit if you don't want to hear this part. It's a very minor spoiler for a very major weakness. And so just be warned, skip ahead if you want, but there's a scene where both Florence and Killian are sitting across from each other in armchairs. Both of them are fully naked and they're just talking. This is post-sex, like the sex wasn't even shown in this scene. They're just sitting there in the buff. And they're talking about a very serious, like, life and death. And this is really like the last meeting that they have. And this scene was what kind of solidified me that these scenes are really only checking a box. One scene, and I've read the interview with Nolan, one scene makes sense. Another scene, fine, keep it short, whatever. This scene, it just felt like, why? Like, it's the most unrealistic thing about this movie, in a movie that's from a creator who's dead set on being real. There's no CGI, other than some fantasy stuff, but the bomb is real. Just everything is so physical in this movie. To have 2 characters, not even like the whole scene, I wouldn't even have this like soapbox if they'd just been like both robed. Like, and just have the robe loose, like just leave enough to the imagination. Like if you're trying to sell the movie with some sex, just, leave them wanting more, because ultimately that is what works more. Like, because this scene, it just doesn't feel real. And as someone, TMI, I apologize, as someone who has spent the first, pre my daughter being born, being naked in my house, just walking around naked, this scene was unrealistic to me. And it's not because of my, nudity preferences in movies. I talked with Amanda, who has lived with me being naked around all the time. Like, this scene did not make sense for them to be naked. Like, at least put some simile veil or robe or underwear on at the time. It's enough on this soapbox. It just didn't make sense. It really felt like we were checking a Hollywood box. This will put us over the edge for getting the Oscar. This will put us over the edge for getting the mainstream audience who love nudity, to like our movie that they would probably consider long and boring. So let's throw them a bone with this nudity. You know what I'm saying? And it just felt like, just a real weak point in the overall writing and direction of this movie. Like Florence, whether she felt emboldened by it or not, I'm not gonna judge her one way or the other, but it felt like it cheapened the narrative of their relationship arc. And just kind of took me out of the movie. So, let's go to the last thing. The last thing is the length. It's 3 hours long, almost exactly. And I was mostly, I'd say 90% unbothered by how long this movie was. I felt like the transition between Act 2 and Act 3 felt long to me. That's when I first, over 2 hours in, or I was starting to finally feel like, okay, this is going longer than I thought. I thought we'd reach some closure by now, and so that kind of was the first point that I was kind of like taken out of the reality of how long the movie's been going. But it ramped back up for me pretty quickly. Like, it was not a long, oh, hurry up, it was just like, oh yeah, this is going pretty long, and oh yeah, okay. That was kind of my in theater reaction to it. The third act really ramps up with the performances, going back to how great the acting is. The performances really were like, oh, and then the sound design, oh, and then the way they ultimately ended the movie, bang, just so good. So the length of the movie, and I know that's a lot of people's complaints about it, but I really didn't feel it except for a short bit between Act 2 and 3. To compare and contrast historical movie period pieces with length, to give you an example why I think this one is better, with the overall message of the movie landing and really using that 3 hours, as opposed to another Oscar baiting movie, The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese. That movie is 3 hours long, and I tell you what, you can shave off 90 minutes of that movie easily and still arrive at the same conclusion, the same message of the story that Martin was telling. I promise you, we could chop it up and I would still feel the same emotions and understand the story of Robert De Niro's life in that movie, Al Pacino's life in that movie, with 90 minutes cut out of that movie. So this Oppenheimer feels different from that. Oppenheimer feels like, okay, we really did every facet. We were really telling his story, and it really showed. And I needed the fullest of full pictures to really kind of let me sit with the overall message of the movie. And so, yeah. So while it is long, I think it's still worth it. Overall, this movie is super heavy. That's why, it goes with Barbie, even though Barbie is going to be a lot more thought-provoking than you think it will be. But overall, just get some Disney movies out, put your favorite sitcom on after you watch it, but I'm going to be lying awake thinking about this movie for several weeks, and I definitely think it's easily going to be, if I didn't say this at the beginning, this is easily going to be one of my top 5 movies of the year. It might be on the lower end, but there's no other weekend seeing Oppenheimer and Barbie that you just don't want to miss this. You want to go to the theater, see both of these movies. And yeah, so Barbenheimer Part 1, A+, 4.5 out of 5 stars, almost a masterpiece. If we could just cut out that scene, we'd be great. Yeah, so enjoy it. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the movies.